Welcome, everybody. This is the Brainrich Kids podcast. We have Kate Crawford as our guest. Kate, please introduce yourself and tell us everything interesting about you and why we should listen and tune into what you have to say.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Kate Crawford. I'm a licensed physical therapist. I have over 15 years experience working in the public and private sectors here in Canada. I've worked with pediatrics, I've worked with orthopedics and post-op and all the way up to palliative care. So I've worked with all ages and wonderful people. I'm still doing physiotherapy, but I started my business, Kore Breathwork, back in 2021. I think I was getting really tired, a little frustrated and burnt out of the fix me mentality of traditional rehab and of healthcare in general. I was looking to kind of like flex my health coaching muscles a little bit more and really bring some emphasis back to nervous system regulation, finding really safe and easy ways for people of all ages to be able to move through their life from a really embodied place, from a place of calm, from a place of groundedness, and from just a place of knowing, of feeling like quote unquote normal. I think that that's been really tricky over the last like 3 to 5 years, especially with the pandemic. I started my business back in 2021 with more of an emphasis on like holistic health. And that's kind of where I found breathwork.
Understood. And why, with your prior education and things like that, why focus on breath work specifically? What's so magical about it?
Yeah, and it is magical. I love that word. For myself, this actually started when I was pregnant. I have two young kiddos. They're 7 and 9. So this started for me when I was a new mom, very tired, exhausted, read all the books and wanted to be like this perfect parent and was really trying to keep up with all of the information that can be thrown at you during that time in your life. And so I started playing around with just bringing awareness to my breath in an attempt to feel less crazy. So, some of those more well-known breath patterns like breathing in and out through the nose and trying to kind of calm your heart rate down, those kind of like well-known breath patterns. The breath work that I facilitate now with clients is more of an active breath pattern. And I really love the active breathing for shedding light on some of the ways that you may be participating in your life that just isn't working for you anymore. So these patterns of being, some of these patterns that we pick up from our mom and our dad when we are in childhood, like that important developmental age of 0 to 7. So a lot of the work has shifted for me using this active breath pattern in really getting around, I'm going to call them like patterns of being or patterns of energy or these kind of ways of being that we get hooked into that aren't necessarily working for us on an energetic level anymore. We're exhausted, we're burnt out, we keep doing the same things over and over again and we're not quite sure why. Yeah.
I'm with
it's
you
really
on
amazing.
that
Yeah.
on that note. I do quite a bit of cold plunges. So I
Yeah.
have a cold plunge at my house. We meet with my friends every Sunday. We have a tradition, and before we dive into literally a 34-degree cold plunge, we do breath work. And I explained to people, I said, hey, this ancient science, ancient knowledge literally says that breathing is the only function of your body that you can do both consciously and subconsciously.
Yep.
So in a way, those yogis in the past, they were using that mechanism of breathing as a pathway between your consciousness and the subconscious and conscious states of being. So I do Vipassana as well. So I like that style of meditation, me personally. And every meditation, every yogi, a lot of modern science. So I even have like these devices like for breathing
Yeah.
science. I have so many different things breathing related because I understand the importance. So you touched on something about connecting with yourself, connecting with your. But then I don't want to put my words in your mouth, but I want you to speak about it, the ancestry and the generational traumas, right? So I want to understand how does it work. So tell me a little bit about that, what that is. How are you working with people? What does it do for them, and how breathing can help?
Yeah. So I use these words interchangeably. So sometimes I'll speak to like ancestral trauma, intergenerational trauma, or intergenerational patterns. And the way that I like to look at this from a very physical therapy perspective, I like to look at these patterns of being and how they feel in the body. Okay. I love breathing for coming into the body. And then I love kind of like bridging this gap for people. So when I have somebody who I'm working with who is exhibiting a lot of like chronic symptoms, so that could be chronic pain, so like a fibromyalgia or an autoimmune disorder. So I do work with a lot of women who will have like a lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or even like multiple sclerosis. Oftentimes, these more chronic diagnoses, and this can extend to cancer, this can extend to like chronic disease as well. These types of diagnoses have a very intergenerational feel to them, I like to say. So, these kind of like long held beliefs that we have been passed down to us from like generation to generation. And I'm really talking about ways of being here, ways of feeling. So when we start to kind of dive into this on a very kind of like superficial level, I'm talking about like, how did your mom relate to herself? How much of that were you picking up from childhood? How did she relate to her mom? How were your parents connecting in with one another? How much of these patterns or ways of being are kind of playing out in your body that aren't necessarily working for you? So from a very like kind of like very healthcare 3D perspective, I like to bridge this gap for people with a chronic diagnosis. I do that because they feel the same. It feels heavy, there's burdensome, there's chronicity there. And oftentimes these diagnoses are really poorly understood, especially for women. Like there's really not a great understanding of the female body at large. So oftentimes, and I would get frustrated in grad school because we would talk like, let's take fibromyalgia, for example, is just like widespread pain. So you really just get that diagnosis, 8 or more like pain points, then you have fibromyalgia, but there's no real mechanism of injury. I did a lot of chronic pain work when I worked in the hospital. And oftentimes it was women who were coming in after a really traumatic event. There was like a car accident where their kids were in the car. There was like a big emotion around like the physical injury. And so, yeah, the pain kind of like hangs out in a way that some of these patterns of being are kind of like passed on from generation to generation. Hi, Kitty.
Sorry about that. This,
That's okay.
the reason I brought up Vipassana, my Vipassana experience, it's a silent meditation. I don't know if you're aware. So it's for 10 days, you go into a silent retreat. I've experienced pains that I've never experienced before. And it's
Mhm.
not because of this sitting for and meditating for 11 hours a day. It is because of the psychosomatic pains. So they tell you, like, don't think about anything. But of course, you think about everything. And in the process, you can observe what exactly are you thinking about. And I had the situations when the pain was corresponding to what was in my head. And the moment I would let go, that thought, that problem, that idea, the pain would disappear literally in an instant with the same. It was very interesting. So I've experienced that. Not everybody can do like 11 hours a day of
Yeah.
meditation for 10 days in a row. But I am a firm believer of the body conditions and the physical states that came from the emotional state
Yes,
that
absolutely.
originated as the. But tell me a little bit more about. So there are a few situations, a few. So let's start with the simple, specific examples. Let's assume we have a busy mom, newborn, and she's having trouble sleeping. Are there any techniques, breathing techniques, that can maybe reset her parasympathetic nervous system, help them sleep better? So let's do a little bit of a practical kind of exercise or advice maybe that you can give and explain the differences between the normal breathing and the actually what you do, what you teach.
Yeah. So let's take the new mom is not getting a lot of sleep, is having all these new things thrown at her. That sounds to me, I mean, I'll just speak from my own experience. When I was a new mom, I was in fight or flight often. I was there a lot. I have a tendency towards anxiety. I was really worried about my babies. I was worried about all the things. And when we start to engage and hang out in the sympathetic nervous system, we're unable to get a nice deep belly breath, and we tend to breathe more shallowly, kind of using our accessory breathing muscles. Yeah. So a really great way to connect, and I would encourage this mom to do this throughout the day, is really dropping down into the belly. So the respiratory diaphragm is in our upper abdomen. It hangs out like a dome-shaped muscle. It hangs out underneath the ribs. As we breathe in, that muscle kind of flattens out. It pushes down towards the pelvis. And then as we exhale, it kind of recoils. It's a passive recoil. So just put a hand on the area, the upper part of the belly, and you're really just trying to breathe into the belly. Now, if you still feel like your shoulders are coming up and down, I would lie on your back, get like super cozy and comfy. I used to do this when my kids would nap. I would just lie down with them and I would just focus on this breath. So you want to try to get like 5-second inhale and a 5-second outhale. That's really going to help to engage that optimal heart rate variability, which is going to slow the heart rate down. So if we can work to kind of slow the heart rate down, that's going to like shoot with the cortisol is going to calm a bit. And it really is helpful for sleeping because you focus on your breath and you can kind of like take some time away from all the thoughts. And I was always amazed at how this was helpful to co-regulate with my kids, especially when they were younger. And I still do it with my 7 and my 9-year-old when they're freaking out. Like my daughter had a splinter in her thumb yesterday and she was just like freaking out. Like she thought her thumb was going to fall off. So we breathe together and it's a really nice way to co-regulate with your kiddos as well.
I'm curious, is it true? I've heard it somewhere. Is it true that babies actually do breathe using their belly breathing?
Yeah.
And then when we become adults, we kind of start breathing shallow through the chest.
It's actually when we start school. It's super young. It's like around 6 or 7, and there's a ton of evidence-based research on this. And it is for 2 main reasons. It's the posture. So kids go from moving and using their respiratory diaphragm in the way that they should. And then for most of us, our kids will go into like a really sedentary setting. So it's posture, but it's also like the stress. It's the added like stress of not wanting to do anything wrong and the anxiety that just comes, I think, with your basic educational system right now. So yeah, it happens early.
I want to get a couple of techniques in the portfolio. So you're saying if you want to go back to sleep, do the deep breathing using the belly breathing, right? So the diaphragm.
Diaphragmatic breathing.
What about instant stress situations when you're driving on the road, somebody catch you in, when you're experience a burst of anger or cortisol or anything like that?
Yeah. So from just like a very somatic, like being in a human body experience, if you're in a place where you can just allow that emotion to come out, whether it's in like laughter or a yell or just getting that energy moving out of the body, I always find that is like super duper helpful as a starting point. I mean, if you've got kids in the back seat and you don't want to like scream at your steering wheel, I understand that. But if you are in a place where you can just move that energy naturally, the way that the body wants to kind of express itself, I would encourage doing that first. But then you can, as you're stressed, so like that adrenaline pumps up, you kind of feel it through your whole body. So engaging with the belly breath is helpful there too. But adding in a breath hold can also be really helpful as well. So it's the same pattern. It's breathing in through the nose for like 3 to 5 seconds. And then it's a hold at the top of the breath for about 3 to 5 seconds. And then it's a longer exhale, about 7 to 8 seconds.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to calm down, so you breathe through the nose, you exhale through the mouth, and then you hold. And then when on the longer exhale versus the inhale.
Yeah. So it's an inhale for 5. It's a hold at the top. And then it's an exhale, a longer exhale, like just letting all the energy go, letting all the breath go. So you can really kind of like, you can force the exhale a little bit and then you meet it with the inhale again. So there's just a hold at the top of the breath.
If I want to understand the logic behind the breathing exercises and how they're structured, how many of those techniques are out there? how do they differentiate between, because I've heard about the box technique and
Yeah, that's a good
the
one too.
pineal gland exercise. So maybe just list a few and explain kind of so people can, if not memorize, but at least understand the logic, right? So what they should do to achieve what kind of result.
Yeah. So the biggest thing to remember is anytime you're trying to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, anytime you're trying to just like calm your stress levels down, you want to be breathing in and out through the nose. That's automatically going to engage that sympathetic nervous system, and it's going to start to tone the vagus nerve, which is really important for the parasympathetic nervous system. So any type of breathing that you're doing, whether it's the breath holds, whether it's the box breathing, whether it's the diaphragmatic breathing that we've been talking about, as long as you're doing that in and out through the nose, you're going to achieve that response of like decreased heart rate, feeling more calm, coming back down to like a baseline of 0. If you're going in and out, if you go in through the nose and out through the mouth, that's going to achieve a similar response. It really just depends like what's available to you. So I know some of my clients, they don't like the slowness of the inhale and exhale out through the nose. So they'll do more kind of like exhaling out through the mouth, and that's totally fine. The breathing that I was talking about before, that more active breathing, which is like in and out through the mouth, there's no space between the inhale and the exhale. It's really bringing oxygen into the body. Those breath techniques, and there's a couple different ones. There's the holotropic breathing and the circular breathing, or the conscious connected breath, which is what I love to do with clients. That is really going to start to bring awareness to the body, and it's really going to start to move energy. So if you're in your car and you almost hit a bus, or like something happens and your cortisol shoots up in the moment, let out that little burst of energy, whatever you need to get out. Go and do some parasympathetic breathing in and out through the nose in the moment. If when you get home, you're still feeling like really flustered and you're still feeling like angry and there's still some energy or some emotion that wants to move, then the active breathing is really good for that. So there's a few different techniques with that. It's the same type of breath pattern that we fall into when we do active exercise, right? So I think that's why it also feels good to go for a run or a swim or a brisk walk. Like we're moving energy, the breath is moving, and it just feels good.
I was going to ask you about the lymphatic system. So I think I saw it somewhere on your website. You're mentioning the lymphatic system. What is the connection between breathing and lymphatic system in the human body?
Yeah. So when you said the breath is magical at the beginning, this is why I love it so much, is because it really is the system in the body that it's regulating and it's balancing and it's doing all the things for all these other systems. So we've just been talking about like heart rate and circulation and how it really is going to play a role in that level. Like it's always going to help to bring the heart rate down. From just a nervous system perspective, it is the respiratory system that is going to bring that back online for us. It also aids in digestion because the respiratory diaphragm is right above the intestines. And then from a lymphatic drainage system. So this is where it gets like a little bit more like it's a bit more of like, well, how I like to call just like a little bit more of like a spiritual connection to the body. So the lymphatic system is this beautiful network of glands that help to, and lymph nodes, I guess is the word I'm looking for. They like take all the garbage out of our system essentially. So I love to look at it like the respiratory diaphragm. It's just kind of working as we breathe to like move all the garbage out in this really natural, lovely way. Like I love the lymphatic system in the body because there's really, you do nothing, right? It just works for you in this really lovely way to keep you continually balanced and to kind of move all the garbage or the muck out. And I find that with breath, and when we're looking at kind of more like that moving of energy and the moving of emotion, it's a very similar response.
Hmm. So in order to move lymphatic system, to do like lymphatic drainage through breathing, should you be laying down? Should you be upside down, or it doesn't really matter?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, if you have, like, say you've had like a breast removed or you've had mastectomy and you've had to have lymph nodes removed as well, that might change things a little bit in terms of like if you're having lymphedema or if there's more swelling built up, just from a positional perspective. But if you're just looking at it from something that you want to kind of like add into your routine, yeah, I look at it more on an emotional and an energetic level. It's just going to help to kind of move as you move like the stuck energy in the body and the stuck emotion, which is like, if you look at it from more of like a metaphysical perspective, I look at it as like the muckety muck in the body. It's just going to kind of like naturally help the lymphatic drainage. And it's not so much drainage, it's like just making sure that there's clear pathways in the body to maintain equilibrium and to maintain balance, which is what the whole human body is.
Yeah, I do before I do the cold plunge, I do Wim Hofman style breathing because I want to oxidize my body. Sometimes I do feel lightheaded. When you feel lightheaded, there's also a time where you do it with the Wim Hofman. You do in and out at a rapid pace, and then you exhale, and then you hold it for maybe a minute or two. And sometimes I space out. Sometimes I just dissolve in space. And I'm curious if you know from the physical standpoint, in terms of the processes that are happening in the brain, what exactly is happening? Why am I disappearing in space? Why does oxygen make so much impact? Like I'm feeling almost drunk. What's going on in the brain?
Yeah. So I believe it's a lack of oxygen. Well, are you getting it when you do the hold? Or are you getting it with the active breathing?
So what's interesting is I do have this little device to put on the finger, measure oxygen level. So the oxygen level goes up. So
Yeah.
I feel what's happening is that I do rapid breathing in and out, and then I get more oxygen. I don't measure it during the breathing. I measure it before and after
Okay.
a few rounds of breathing. I think what's happening is when I exhale, the body is probably burning or using that leftover oxygen that I have. And then when I exhale again and hold it for another 15 seconds, I think it kind of like body says, in my mind, I don't know actually the explanation, but I feel like my body says like, oh, we were just deprived for the whole 2 minutes of oxygen. You just got this huge gasp of air. We got to take every possible molecule of O2 available out there, and we're going to store it in the blood. And so that's how it felt. And then you do a couple rounds of that. So I think, and then when we measure it, we do get, so myself and my friends, so we always see an increase by a point or two on that little meter that we use for the oxygen.
So I'm
and then
curious to know, do you get like, is it better the more that you do? Like, do you get kind of foggy at the beginning and then the more that you do, it gets better, or is it about the same reaction?
So it really depends. And now I understand my body much better. So
Yeah.
if I want to get more oxygen, if I want to get oxygen high, I start doing rapid breathings, and we do about 40 of those roughly. Then when I exhale and hold, I feel this like, like a little expansion, contraction in my brain, and it kind of feels interesting, warm, like a little tingle maybe here and there. And then when I begin the first round, I do it usually a little bit faster. Then the second round, I do slower, and
Mm-hmm.
my breathing is more deep. And
Yep.
then the third round, I usually do about 3 rounds. And the third round, I actually do half the speed compared to what the app is telling you. So I do half the speed, but I do, completely like 95%, 98% capacity breathing to the point
Yeah.
where my lungs almost kind of not hurt, but expand fully, expand the stomach, expand the lungs. And then when I do the exhale on the last round, I try to hold a little extra long. And then at the end, when I'm about to open my mouth and grab a gasp for air, I actually hold it for a little bit, and it creates this like little vacuum effect. And
Mhm.
I sit straight, I squeeze my spine, and I went to Joe Dispenza once, and he taught me the pineal gland meditation. So with my closed eyes, I do feel kind of like the heat and the warmth coming from the back of my spine and then hitting my brain. And then when it hits that the liquid and all, then I feel this like bliss and this kind of dissolution and the black space and all this stuff. And then we're talking about like literally a couple of vacuum exercises for through 2-3 seconds, extra 5 seconds I hold. And then when I get more air in, it's like the endorphins are flowing. There's like,
Yeah.
hey, we survived. You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so right now I do control. I don't really pass out. I don't get dizzy as much as some people could. But I wanted to kind of bring it up because I do know that some people take it, they start doing breathing while they're driving, and they can pass out. So that's super
Yeah.
dangerous.
Don't do active breathing when you're driving. Just stick with it in and out through the nose. Just bring yourself back to baseline. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I've experienced differences. I've done a holotropic breathing. That
Hmm.
was really interesting. This is the time when actually I did almost pass out because they make you go into some interesting positions. You're on the mat, obviously, you kind of arch your back and you do all of that stuff. And that was a lot of oxygen. So
Yeah.
it was guided. And the guy that I did it with, he was like in, out, in, out. And that was a lot of oxygen for me, more than I normally would
And you
take.
do it for a
Uh,
while, don't you, with the holotropic breathing?
yes,
Like
yes.
it's,
I
yeah.
believe it was, I don't remember what it was, like 15, 30 minutes. The whole event was for an hour, but we did a few
Okay.
things. But then I literally felt the vibration in my fingers. I felt like my body was recharged electronically, like literally felt the charge.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's typically the symptoms that well, it's not really a symptom. It's in my opinion a beautiful side effect of doing the active breathing. And I love to tell people like it's you, like you're feeling your essence and your energy, and like the breath can really like bring that alive. And I love the clarity that people get after a really good active breath session like that. Like a lot of times what I'll do with clients is we'll set an intention before the breathe. And I do live guided breathwork sessions. So it's all kind of like intuitively led. I come at it from the lens of like the physical body. So I have a really good conversation with people about what their physical body is communicating to them. I always believe that your symptoms are really like have a message to tell you essentially, and that your physical body is really just leading you down a path of like least resistance, and it's trying to help you, and be your cheerleader. And yeah, I love that space at the end of the session where people are just in this really amazing feeling and can just gain clarity on like whatever the intention was before we started.
so that's the piece that I'm missing. I want to understand how that works. So you set intention. So I'm assuming you have to be there with the person, right? So you're sort of guiding them a little bit. That's the value, right, that you bring, I suppose. I've never experienced that. I mean, besides Vipassana, but you do that on your own. But I've never
Mhm.
experienced when somebody was leading me into some sort of incantation or the setting anything. But I'm curious, how does it work? Or when you work with the clients, what kind of intentions do they set? What kind of impact it creates? If you can speak to that, that would be super interesting.
Yeah. So, with my physical therapy background, most people are coming to me with pain, right? Like, I've just gotten this diagnosis. What does it mean, right? Like they've tried all these other things, right? Which I know all about that traditional rehab. I know how band-aidy and boxy it can be, right? So, oftentimes people come through that lens, and we have a very honest conversation about like, when did the pain first start? How are you feeling? I'm really trying to tie this back to energy and emotion. I very much believe that that is what is underneath the physical pain, and that those emotions and that held energy, it just has something to tell you. So I have a really good conversation with the client before we go in and do the breathe. The breathe usually lasts between 30 and 40 minutes. And it's always really amazing to me what comes through. It's not scripted. I just am kind of like open to share in this really personal experience with this person. And so yeah, for like lack of a better word, they're just very intuitively led. And then they're just doing that active breath on their own. Like I'm prompting the breathing, but they're just doing that active inhale, exhale. So the conscious connected breath that I do, it's in through the mouth, out through the mouth with no space between the inhale and the exhale. And so, yeah, it's such a lovely pattern to just drop into your body. And I love that breath pattern for just really getting out of the monkey mind, kind of dropping down into the heart and just really understanding on a very spiritual, personal level, like, what is it that desires to move? What are the messages? Like, what direction do I want to be taking? So oftentimes it starts as like, I have had hip pain for 8 years and I'm not quite sure why,
Mm.
and we go into the breath session with like, there's this crazy connection between something that happened in your dad's family. And, we're going to kind of work through some of these energetic patterns. I go into great detail on energetic patterns and like how it's playing out in the physical body. But yeah, it's always amazing to me that like hip pain can then turn into like something completely different.
On that note, I'm from Ukraine, and we even have these expressions, and I'm pretty sure in every culture you hear these things. So the expressions that we have, for example, if you have unexpressed anger, you will
Hmm.
feel pain in your throat, right? If
Hmm.
you have a long-term unresolved issues of some sort, you will feel the pain on your neck right here.
Hmm.
If you, that's the ones that I just remember, and some of them I actually experienced. If you feel pain in your hip area, most likely that has something to do like a sexually related traumas or whatever that is. If your knees hurt, and for whatever reason, the right one, I don't know why the right one, it just stuck in my mind, but
Hmm.
that represents worry about your parents. Something, yeah, actually, I did experience that one in my Vipassana session. That was extremely interesting. And the moment I let it go, the moment I processed it all and I let it go, my pain disappeared in an instant. And it was a very sharp pain. So I'm curious if you're aware of any others. I did have other interesting pains during my Vipassana things, but yeah, I'm not sure. Well, anyways, I can share. Yeah, it's not a secret. But I watch the news. So I'm from Ukraine, and I watch
Hmm.
news every day. And I'm safe. I'm here in the States. My relatives are safe. My friends, thank God, they're safe. But I've been watching news every single day for the last. At that time it was a year, but by now it's 2 years. And I had no idea how much impact it made on me. So I
Yeah.
thought, like, yeah, watch the news. It's more of a form of entertainment. I get something, and I never made a big deal out of it. When I went to Vipassana, I experienced the pain. So it was kind of like almost L-shaped pain on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And from my previous experiences, I knew that pain on the day 7-ish, and that is not a physical pain related to me being tired. That's the pain related to some kind of emotions. I had no idea what that was. And it took me 2 days until one morning at 4 a.m. you start your first meditation, 4:30 a.m. And at 4:30 a.m. I started having visions about me fighting in trenches.
Mm.
And I had so much accumulated anger, apparently. I closed my eyes, I started meditating, and usually I can concentrate for maybe 5, 10 minutes. Then I get, then I get a little distraction. Then I try to concentrate for another 5. And then, so within an hour, I usually have multiple periods when I get interrupted by my own thoughts and things like that. This was an hour and a half. I did not open my eyes. I was in the movie for an hour and a half fighting,
Wow.
expressing that anger. And I opened my eyes because there was a sound when they tell like, hey, the end of the session, you can go eat now. That was 1 hour and a half. I had those visions. And at the end of it, almost at the end of it, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm at this retreat. I'm supposed to be in bliss and calm and peace, and I'm so angry. So I started thinking, how can I forgive? How can I let go? How can I find peace? And so, like, in what mindset are you supposed to be okay with it? So I didn't
Hmm.
find the answer, but I just started shifting my mindset from anger to trying to see how can you actually have a peaceful resolution of it. And the moment I started thinking about it, my pain went away. I had that pain for
Okay.
several days and it just disappeared. So that was interesting. But I'm curious if you had anything similar to those kind of experience in your practice.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really
Yeah,
amazing. Like how aware you are. And so it was just your shift in perspective that took the pain away.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I didn't find a solution. It wasn't anything. But
Mhm.
first, two interesting findings. First, I didn't realize how much just watching negative news in this case,
Yeah.
because they were all negative, how much it impacted my emotional state and
Yep.
apparently the physical state as well. That was the first discovery. And the second discovery, obviously, but I made that discovery early in my previous experiences. But that was very interesting when you shift your mindset to more of a, I don't want to be this monk that, kind of doesn't, how do I put it? Sometimes I look at these monks and they're in peace with in harmony with the nature, but I kind of sometimes feel that they're disconnected from the world and they don't bring any value into it. Sometimes I
Absolutely.
feel it like that, right? So I'm not trying to be at that level just yet. I'm trying to work and deliver some impact to this world, but at the same time, yeah. Anyways,
But I think what you're saying is really important. And this is what I see very often when it comes to pain in the body. So your body hears and understands everything that you're doing. You know what I mean? I think there is a place where you have to just make a decision that you're going to work with your body. And then your body's like, okay, here we go. Like, I feel like you've definitely found that with the meditation piece that you do. The perspective shift is important. People don't just get there, and I think a huge part of being in a human body is expressing and experiencing these emotions, right? What I have found most often with my clients is that if you can make the shift from anger, and oftentimes there's some grieving there that has to happen, and I think there's good grieving. There's grieving where you can get to a place of like self-compassion and love. I call it like the good grief, like getting to the good grief. And then I think there's like this other part of grief where we can kind of stay in this victim mentality and we can just stay stuck in the sadness and the anger. But and I don't know if grief is really the word that you would use with that experience, but it's like there's this shift that has to happen and your body has to understand the feeling. And if you can get to that feeling of gratitude and compassion for just your experience, whatever it is, you know what I mean? That's like the sweet spot. And that's when the pain can just kind of subside a little bit, and you can then stay in this feeling of just like release or bliss or gratitude. Like, I think you've experienced this many times in your body, which is really amazing. It's really hard for people to get there sometimes. And, I think that's where the support comes in. But yeah, if you can make the shift into like the good grief, I like to call it. I need a better word for it because I feel like there's so much that goes along with that word, but
it's more like processing and accepting and sort of reliving, and not reliving it, but yeah, I understand what you're trying
it's
to
like,
say.
I think we use the word like accepting and forgiveness. Like that doesn't
Mhm.
just like happen, right? And I think there's this way to experience that for your body to experience it. And just you get to this point where you can finally just let it go, like whatever it is, right? Whatever, if it's just like whatever it may be, if you can get to this place where your body believes that you've actually let it go and that you're good, like the pain's just like, okay.
Yeah, that was one word that you used at the very beginning of this podcast. You said you used the word fixing ourselves, fixing others. And a lot of our angers are connected to the inability to fix things. We want to fix so many things, and sometimes we're just unable, and that creates frustration and anger. So part of the letting go is the process when you stop wanting to fix things, when you just observe, when you let it go,
You can just
when you accept
be.
it, right? So
Yeah.
because we have the expectation and we have the reality, and if it doesn't match perfectly, we get anger, we get frustrated, we get all of those things. So if we start trying to move it and align the expectations with the reality, because we cannot, so this is I think for me at least that's the process. I'm still learning. I can't let everything go. I'm still trying to fix a lot of things, including people and things like that. But speaking of fixing kids, right? What would be a good way to introduce kids to breathing techniques? What would help them? And maybe you can teach a simple technique for specific use cases so the moms can use it.
Yeah, so I do a lot of breathing with my kids. I always say, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of like physical activity. I always say the best breath work is to just get outside and move your body, especially when it comes to kids. So if you have a kiddo that's feeling a lot of fear around a new activity, or if they have a lot of anxiety going to school, that's a big one in my house. We always just move our bodies to move the energy, and that is the best way. So if you have the time, put on your favorite song, have a little dance party. It's like it's the best thing ever. And it shifts the energy really, really quickly. And oftentimes the kids don't even remember what the feeling was about anyway. So that would be my first recommendation. But if you don't have that time, or if it's more of just like you're in the car and you really want to just kind of calm everyone down, the breath hold that I talked about earlier is phenomenal. I love doing this with feelings of fear or anxiety in kiddos. Kids have a higher respiratory rate than adults, so the breath is just a little bit slowed down. So it would be an inhale of 3 seconds in through the nose, a
Mhm.
hold at the top of the inhale for 3 seconds, and then an exhale out through the mouth for 3 seconds. It's kind of like a triangle. So I
Mhm.
always say, like, breathe in, smell the rose through your nose, hold at the top, and then blow the candle out down
S-
at the bottom.
Say it again. Say it again. And blow the roses through the nose. Say it again. What's that?
So smell the rose through your nose,
Huh?
hold at the top for 3 seconds, and then through the mouth, blow the candle out.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's very cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
in terms of the first suggestion, moving's. Sorry about the cat. He just
I
kind of
love
lived
cats.
with me.
I wish mine was coming to snuggle me right now.
So, because a lot of our listeners, they have play gyms that we make. So, in terms of moving their bodies, that's the whole premise of it. So, they have this 24/7 outlet where they can take a break from schooling, whatever activity they do, and literally move their bodies. And parents and kids can do it as well because the gyms that we make, they're so strong, so they can hold an adult as well.
Yeah,
So when you're in Minnesota, and as much as you'd love to go outside, you can't. So then that's what people do these days.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. This guy is bothering me because he's also hungry, I guess. Uh, I wanted to, yeah, so I was going to ask you about the kids and how to introduce them to the breathing, because I have a feeling that a lot of kids these days, or maybe all days, they have a lack of patience to stay. I mean, maybe that's my perception, to
Mhm.
stay still and do the exercise. So I've tried to introduce my nieces to it, and it requires patience. So
Yes.
because they like to mimic, but at the same time, when you to achieve the result, you want to go through three, 4 rounds. Sometimes they don't have that much patience. So I'm curious about your experience. How did you teach your kids to enjoy the breathing?
Yeah, so my daughter is really into it, but she's a bit older. My son can't sit still at all. He doesn't sit still in class. He's just moving all the time. And I think if they're of a certain age, I would invite them into the conversation, like, and it's really going to help to validate how they're feeling in their body. And I'm always amazed at what my son will tell me. So with him, it's not so much anxiety and fear, but he'll get a lot of aggression, he'll feel a lot of anger, and he wants to really shut down. So just having an honest conversation with your child about how they feel like they want to move their body, to move the energy, is like the best place to start. So
Mhm.
my son really doesn't do the sitting still breathing, but he loves hockey, as every good little Canadian boy should. And so I set up a little room for him. We have like this old, like, it's like just a playroom, but he can shoot little like foam pucks at the wall. And honestly, sometimes I have these old boxes and he just needs to like hit his hockey stick on the box. Like, he needs to move that energy in a much more like assertive way. We have really good conversations about how it's not okay to hit people with the hockey stick. But in this situation, if that's how he feels like he wants to move the energy, or sometimes he runs around the house 5 times. We made up a game where we kick the soccer ball over the shed and he just kicks that ball as hard as he can. And his heart rate gets up and he can move that energy and he feels really, really safe doing that. Where my daughter feels like that's a little chaotic and she prefers like the bath and the
Mhm.
breathing and the candles. My son loves a good snuggle. He loves to be quiet when he's ready to be quiet, but that's maybe like 5 minutes out of the entire day. So I would just ask your nieces how they feel like they want to come back to baseline. It's always amazing to me what my son needs to do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. And tell everyone how they can find you, how they can learn more, about what you do. And if I don't know if you do any online sessions, but tell
I do
people how.
mostly online. Yep. Yeah. So you can find everything at my website. It's Kore Breathwork. So Kore breathwork.com. There's tons of information there about how I view the human body, how I work with clients. I do a lot of one-on-one stuff. I have courses and digital downloads and lots of free stuff. So check out the website. You can find everything there.
What are your most popular courses online?
I have it's a high touch group course. It's called The Secret Language of the Body, and it's a 3-month course where we really dive into how familial patterning, so the relationship with your mom, the relationship with your dad, some of these like ancestral and intergenerational patterns are really playing out in the human body. We dive into the birth story and the relationship with your siblings, and it's just amazing. I love it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Kate. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. And thank you. Thank you very much.
So happy
Thanks.
to be here. Thanks.
Likewise.